Delegations from Israel, Hamas, and the U.S. are set to begin key peace negotiations in Egypt. They hope to finalize a ceasefire deal based on President Donald Trump's Gaza plan. Hamas signaled it's on board with releasing the hostages. It stopped short of a full endorsement of the plan. President Trump took that as a win, now shifting his pressure to Israel. Boxing in Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, explicitly calling on him to stop the bombing on Gaza. While Netanyahu expressed optimism about the hostages being returned, he also defended his pursuits of all-out war.
Thanks
to the great support I received from you, citizens of Israel, and thanks to the bravery of our fighters, I stood up to enormous pressure from home and abroad to stop the war and to give in to Hamas's dictates. You know what would have happened then. We would have left Gaza having achieved almost nothing.
Joel Rubin is former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for the Obama administration. He joins the chat. Welcome, Joel.
Good morning, Audie.
Okay, so Netanyahu is dealing with his own domestic politics, his own political coalition, which hinges on a more hardline stance. So what do you see in how he is trying to message this to the public, to the international community?
Well, look, if there's one thing about Prime Minister Netanyahu, it's that he values his political survival over all else. And he looks at Donald Trump and he's afraid because Donald Trump is someone who can literally throw him out of office. And that is a unique position for the American president.
Why do you think that? Is it because of Trump's emphasis on the hostages, or what has endeared him to the Israeli community?
I got to tell you, he's beloved in Israel. From moving the American embassy to Jerusalem, to allowing Israel to annex the Golan Heights, to bombing Iran, the list goes on and on. And Netanyahu knows this, that if Trump starts denouncing Netanyahu, and he's a wild card, what if he says, I'm going to cut aid, I'm going to stop sending you the weapons? That would get Bibi thrown out. And so for Netanyahu, he's playing for time. This deal does, if it works, if it goes forward, have the chance to get hostages out, get aid into Gaza, move towards a ceasefire. But it's not much of a deal. I got to tell you, it's more of an announcement and a set of promises and some kind of framework that potentially could possibly have something.
But it's not nothing. President Trump told Jake Tapper yesterday in a series of text messages, we're going to show you some of those, that Hamas faces, quote, complete obliteration if it refuses to give up power in Gaza. I think most agreements have talked about the idea of there is no Hamas ruling Gaza after this scenario. Can you talk about Hamas itself? Like, how does this happen? How do you bring such a group to the table?
First of all, I got to say that that's ridiculous. Look, this has been a hot war for 2 years, but it's a 40-year war with Hamas going back a multi-decades. And you have Hamas in the West Bank fighting a low-boil war with the Israelis and the settlers over there. So the idea that Hamas is done, while I would wish it be so, that is not in the cards in this. And that is what they're going to have to negotiate. Now, what are the modalities? Hamas could potentially be pushed out if, for example, in a reconstruction process, the Arab nations want to put money in to rebuild it and get new Palestinian leaders. But that is not clear as to being part of this deal. Nobody signed the paper in public yet. So that's what I'm looking for. Will the Israelis and the Hamas leaders sign the same piece of paper and agree to the same details? Then we have a deal.
All right, I want to bring something to the rest of the group, addressing something you mentioned earlier. A new poll finds 2/3 of Americans oppose sending more weapons to Israel, and the same support sending humanitarian aid to Gaza. And I want to talk a little bit about this shift. You're nodding. Is this something you're getting a sense of as well?
I definitely think there's wartime fatigue in America. So first you had the entire thing with Russia and Ukraine, fatigue around why are we footing that war when we have so many domestic problems at home. Now you're seeing a similar situation in Israel, but it's amplified by what people are seeing on social media, which is photos and videos of Gazans that are starving, kids that are dying, and that makes people in America very uncomfortable with continuing to support Israel's side of the war.
But what do you think that is what has changed? I mean, there's a whole bunch of students out there who are probably like, hey, thanks for coming around.
Yeah, I think this is one of the effects of the war, which is going to be dangerous for Israel in the long term because it's made the Israeli-Palestinian question a domestic political issue in the United States, as it never was over the 40 years that you were talking about, not just in the Democratic Party, but more generally now.
Right. Meaning the average person has now opinions about Netanyahu, not Israel, but even about the government.
Perhaps this explains some of the president's actions, because what's been missing in all of his peace efforts so far in Israel and in Ukraine is his willingness to impose power and leverage, American leverage. We often talk about more nefarious ways he does it in the United States. But is this exactly what should be happening now, that Trump is finally standing behind his statements?